He told me to choose between him and the dog. I didn't even let him finish the sentence. It's funny how you can go from dreaming about wedding dresses one week to standing on the side of a rural road in jeans soaked with rain, cradling a half-starved dog against your chest. My name's Morgan, and I used to think my life would be wrapped up in neat little boxes. Career, engagement, house, kids. But that all shifted the day I pulled over on County Route 16, heart racing for reasons I didn't understand yet. I'd been driving back from a real estate showing outside of Oak Hill. The weather had turned nasty, wind slamming against my Subaru, and I was in a rush to get home to catch dinner with Ethan. That's when I saw him, this matted, shivering lump right by the drainage ditch. I don't know what possessed me to brake so hard, but I did. The car skidded a bit before settling. I didn't even think twice. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold drizzle. The dog didn't move at first. He looked like part of the landscape. Mud-caked fur, one eye crusted over, and ribs I could count from 10 feet away. But when I knelt down and held out my hand, something flickered behind that tired eye. Hope, maybe. Or hunger. I didn't care. I whispered, "Come here, buddy." And to my amazement, he limped forward and collapsed into my arms. He stank of infection and wet earth, and my jacket was ruined in seconds. But all I could think about was getting him warm. I wrapped him in the blanket I kept for emergencies and set him in the back seat. His breathing was shallow. I drove like I was hauling precious cargo. By the time I got to River Valley Animal Hospital, the rain had picked up to a steady drumbeat. I ran inside, holding the dog like a newborn. The receptionist, an older woman named Carol, saw the look on my face and didn't waste a second. She waved me toward the back, where Dr. Rayburn came out to meet me. "What happened?" he asked, already pulling on gloves. "Found him on the road. I think he's been out there a while." They went to work immediately, shaving fur, cleaning wounds, running IVs. I stood in the corner, arms crossed over my chest, watching them save a life I'd found purely by chance. Dr. Rayburn finally stepped back and nodded. "He's not out of the woods yet, but you brought him in just in time." I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Then my phone buzzed. Ethan. I stared at it for a second, heart sinking. I'd completely forgotten to call him. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Where are you?" he asked. His tone was sharp. "Dinner's cold." "I found a dog. He was in bad shape. I had to take him to the vet." There was a pause, then laughter, but not the good kind. "You skipped dinner for some stray? Seriously?" "He would have died, Ethan." "You're being dramatic." I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. "Look, I'm sorry. I'll explain later." "No, you won't. I've had enough of this. You keep picking animals over me. First that feral cat last month, now this. It's like I'm dating a shelter." I didn't respond. I was too tired, too disappointed. He kept talking, but it was a blur. That was the beginning of the end for us. The next few days were a blur of checkups and sleepless nights. I stayed by the dog's side, brought him cooked chicken and rice, and named him Bucket. Don't ask me why. Maybe because his eyes looked like deep wells that had held more sadness than anything else. Bucket was slow to recover, but every small step, a wag of the tail, a lifted head, felt like a victory. I called off work more than I should have. My boss wasn't thrilled, but I used vacation time. Ethan sent one last text asking me to call him if I ever decided to rejoin the human world. I didn't reply. 1 week later, Bucket walked. Not for long, and not without wobbling, but he moved across the vet's floor to greet me when I came in. Carol smiled like a proud grandmother. "You've got a fighter," she said. "He's got a home," I replied. Taking Bucket home was like moving in with someone who'd never seen warmth. He sniffed every corner like it might disappear. He slept curled in a tight ball by the radiator. Every time I left the room, he whimpered, as if afraid I'd vanish. But day by day, trust grew. He started following me around the house. I couldn't even go to the bathroom without him pressing his shaggy body against the door. I bought him a big blue bed. He never used it. He wanted the rug by my feet instead. Sometimes I wondered what he'd been through. The scars said plenty. A notch missing from one ear. A healed-over spot on his side that looked like an old burn. But whatever it was, it hadn't broken him completely. He still had room to love. That amazed me. The first time I took him to the park, people stared. He wasn't the prettiest dog, not yet. But I saw him clearly. He was brave, gentle, kind. I'd never felt that from Ethan. An older man sitting on a bench watched Bucket nuzzle my hand. "You saved him," he said. "I think he's saving me too," I replied, without thinking. Life got quieter after that. Not easier, but fuller. I spent evenings with Bucket curled up next to me on the couch. I started reading again. I painted my kitchen the color I liked, not the one Ethan picked. I even hosted a small cookout with my neighbors. Bucket was the hit of the party, gently taking hot dog bites from a toddler's hand. Sometimes I missed Ethan. More accurately, the idea of him. The plans we had. But then I'd look at Bucket and feel something steadier than I ever did in that relationship. Love that asked nothing in return, just presence. 3 weeks after bringing him home, we walked past a pet store with a dog-friendly photo booth out front. I put on a silly hat, and Bucket wore a tiny sheriff badge. The picture sits on my fridge now. It's crooked and faded, but every time I see it, I smile. He might have come into my life by accident, but keeping him was the most deliberate choice I ever made. And I'd make it again 1,000 times, even if it meant losing Ethan, even if it meant losing everything else. Because what I gained? Well, he's lying at my feet right now, snoring louder than the dishwasher. And I've never felt more at home. 3 months after Bucket moved in, I woke up to his nose pressed against my cheek and the soft thud of his tail wagging against the comforter. That had become our morning routine, me blinking my way into consciousness while he waited patiently, tail knocking like a metronome. He didn't bark, never had. Just that quiet, patient presence. It was the best alarm clock I'd ever had. The morning sunlight slanted in through the blinds as I scratched his head. All right, coffee first, then your breakfast. Deal?" He licked my hand and stepped back to let me climb out of bed. We headed into the kitchen. I poured kibble into his bowl, added a scoop of cooked chicken from the fridge, then started the coffee maker. Bucket settled into his spot on the mat by the sink, crunching away like it was the best meal he'd ever had. Maybe it was. Every morning felt like a gift to him, and that feeling was contagious. While the coffee brewed, I scrolled through emails on my phone. A message from my manager at Ridge Realty sat unread. I tapped it open, bracing myself for more pressure. Instead, it surprised me. "Morgan, we've missed having you in the office full-time. That said, I've noticed the increase in your client reviews since switching to part-time. You're connecting with buyers in a way that's rare. I'd like to discuss you taking on a mentoring role. Let's chat soon, Jonathan." I stared at the message for a while, heart fluttering. After everything that had changed, some part of me still feared I was falling behind. But maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was growing into someone new. I looked at Bucket. He blinked up at me, tail giving one solid thump. "You're my good luck charm, huh?" That afternoon, we drove out to Whispering Creek Park, a wide expanse of walking trails and open grassy fields about 15 minutes from town. Bucket's coat had started to grow back in, thicker now, with warm caramel tones over his shoulders and legs. He still had some scars, but they blended more now. He looked less like a survivor and more like a dog just living. As we strolled down the trail, a woman jogged past with her golden retriever. She slowed to smile. "Is he a rescue?" I nodded. "Found him on the side of the road. He looks great. Happy." Bucket sniffed the ground, wagging his tail as though he understood. We kept walking, stopping now and then to sit under trees or let Bucket drink from the collapsible bowl I carried in my tote. I watched him interact with the world so carefully, so gently. He didn't lunge or bark at other dogs. He didn't chase squirrels. He just moved at his own pace, pausing often to look back at me. That's when I started thinking about what came next. I'd been putting it off. Fostering. Adopting again. People at the vet clinic had mentioned it. Carol even asked me once if I'd consider helping more dogs like Bucket. At the time, I said I needed to focus on him. But now, maybe we were ready. That evening, I searched online for the local animal shelter's website. Bucket curled beside me on the couch, head resting on my thigh, snoring lightly. I clicked through page after page of dogs needing homes. Old ones. Puppies. Bonded pairs. My chest tightened. So many eyes staring into the camera with a kind of quiet question. I filled out the application to be a foster parent. 2 days later, I got the call. A shepherd mix named Ella had been surrendered. Nervous, but sweet. She wasn't eating well in the shelter, and they were hoping a quiet home might help. I told them yes before I even thought it through. When I brought Ella home, Bucket's reaction was not what I expected. I'd braced myself for jealousy, anxiety, but instead, he greeted her like an old friend, sniffed her face, wagged his tail, then stepped back like he was inviting her in. Ella, on the other hand, shook like a leaf. She hid under the kitchen table for the first hour. I sat nearby, just like I had with Bucket in those early days. I didn't rush. I didn't talk much. Eventually, she crept out and sniffed my hand. Then Bucket padded over and laid down next to her, resting his chin on his paws. That night, she slept in his bed. He chose the rug. It was slow going with Ella. She was scared of sudden noises and flinched when I moved too quickly. But she followed Bucket around like a shadow. If he drank water, so did she. If he laid down, she curled up next to him. It was like she borrowed courage from his calm. A week later, she licked my hand for the first time. By the end of the month, Ella was running zoomies in the backyard with Bucket chasing her, both of them kicking up dirt and barking with joy. I sat on the steps watching, laughing so hard I cried. I sent videos to the shelter staff. They were stunned. "She's like a different dog," the coordinator said. "Would you consider keeping her permanently?" I looked at Ella curled up beside Bucket, both of them fast asleep. I think they already decided. So I adopted her. That's when the stories started. First, a neighbor named Clint knocked on my door one morning with a warm smile and a box of peanut butter dog treats. "I saw your post about Ella. I've got a senior lab who doesn't get around much. Figured you might want these." Then one of my clients, an older woman named Darlene, asked me to help her rehome her brother's dog after he passed away. He was a good boy, just needs someone kind, like you. I didn't take that dog in, but I helped find him a foster. Word got around. Soon I was driving to shelters on weekends, picking up dogs who needed a ride to rescue groups in other states. I learned to keep blankets, leashes, and bottled water in my trunk at all times. I met volunteers, vets, transport drivers, a whole world I never knew existed. Bucket stayed my anchor. No matter how chaotic things got, he remained calm. At adoption events, he greeted everyone like they were old friends. I once caught a little boy in tears, petting Bucket and whispering, "You remind me of my dog in heaven." I wanted to cry too. That night, I sat on my porch with Bucket and Ella, watching fireflies blink through the dusk. "You changed everything," I whispered to them. Then I got an email that made my stomach flip. It was from Ethan. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Saw your dog posts. Looks like you're doing well. Anyway, I'll be in town next weekend. Thought maybe we could grab coffee. No pressure." I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked at Bucket. "You think I should see him?" He blinked at me. I replied to the email. "Thanks, but I'm good. Hope you're well." It felt like shutting a door. A quiet, final click. The next morning, I woke up with Ella curled beside me and Bucket snoring at my feet. Outside, birds chirped. The world was simple again. Not perfect, but right. I poured coffee, opened the back door, and watched both dogs race outside, chasing invisible squirrels and barking into the wind. We had a routine now. Mornings at the park, evenings curled up on the couch, and weekends spent helping others do what I had once done. Save a soul who needed someone to stop, just for a moment, and say, "I see you. Come with me." That life I thought I wanted. Rings and timelines and someone else's version of happiness. Felt like a faded sketch compared to what I had now. This life had scratches and dog hair and sometimes even pee on the rug. But it also had joy, laughter, connection. And every time Bucket pressed his head into my lap, or Ella leapt into the car like she'd never been afraid, I knew I'd made the right choice. Because sometimes love doesn't look like a ring or a bouquet or a picture-perfect life. Sometimes love looks like two dogs racing across a field, and a woman smiling at them like her heart finally made it home. And we were just getting started. The first dog I transported that bit me didn't mean to. His name was Ruger, a gangly mix of hound and who knows what, scared out of his mind and shaking the entire ride. When I reached into the crate to leash him up for the rescue team in Tennessee, he panicked and nipped the side of my hand. Not hard, not deep, but enough to draw blood. The rescue lead, a tall woman named Marissa, came over fast with gloves and gauze. "You okay?" I nodded, holding a cloth against the bite. It wasn't aggression. He was just terrified. Ruger was safely loaded into their van, and I sat on the bumper of my Subaru, trying to make sense of the moment. My hand throbbed, but more than that, my heart ached. How many of them were living like that? Scared, alone, flinching at every kindness like it might be a trap? That was the moment I realized I wanted to do more than foster. I wanted to help the ones people gave up on. So I applied for a rescue license. It was paperwork, home inspections, background checks. But the moment I got the approval email, something clicked in my chest. I called the organization Loving Strays and told them I was ready to be a satellite foster. "You sure you want to go that route?" the coordinator asked. "It's a lot more work than it looks." "I'm sure." That weekend, I converted my guest room into a dog recovery space. I bought extra crates, blankets, first aid kits, and food bowls. I learned how to safely separate animals, how to read stress signals, how to clean wounds without making things worse. Carol even loaned me old equipment from the vet clinic she'd retired from. I called my rescue the Patch, named after the patch of road where I found Bucket. My first official intake was a senior beagle named Franklin. He'd been dumped behind a grocery store with infected ears and arthritis so bad he could barely stand. Ella was gentle with him from the start, curling up beside his crate, licking his ears when he cried out in the night. Bucket, ever the guardian, kept watch from the hallway, eyes open even in sleep. Franklin stayed for 2 months before an older couple adopted him. When they picked him up, the woman knelt beside him, whispering, "We'll love you forever." I cried after they left. Not because I was sad, but because I knew Franklin had landed exactly where he belonged. The Patch became known in our small town. People started reaching out. A neighbor found a puppy under his porch. A woman from the next street over begged me to take in a skinny boxer someone had tied to a stop sign. Local teens volunteered to help clean crates and walk the calmer dogs. One morning, I got a knock on my door. A tall man in his 60s stood there, hat in hand, shifting on his feet. "You Morgan? The one who runs the dog thing?" "I am. Can I help you?" "I got a dog in my barn. Showed up last night. She's nursing. I think there's puppies." I grabbed my keys and followed him out to his farm. Sure enough, a trembling black lab mix lay on a pile of hay, 4 tiny puppies curled against her side. Her eyes followed every movement I made. "I don't know what to do," he said quietly. "I didn't want to call animal control. Figured they'd just—" He didn't finish the sentence. I nodded and crouched low, letting her sniff my hand. It took an hour to get her into the car, puppies tucked into a padded box. She shook the entire ride. I named her Violet. The puppies, Daisy, Fern, Juniper, and Clover. Violet was sick. Worms, mange, an old leg fracture that hadn't healed right. But she was gentle, grateful. She let me bathe her, dry her off, and clean the gunk from her ears while the puppies mewled in the next room. She watched me with tired eyes that spoke of hardship and resilience. That night, Bucket stood guard at her crate like a sentry. Ella licked the noses of the tiny pups whenever one cried out. The house was noisy, chaotic, and smelled perpetually of bleach and peanut butter. But I'd never felt more alive. Somewhere in all this, I stopped thinking of myself as someone who had lost something. Ethan faded into the backdrop of my memory. The life we planned seemed distant, like a faded postcard from a place I never really visited. Instead, I built something different. The Patch grew, not just in numbers, but in spirit. I hosted adoption days on my front lawn, set up dog washing stations with the help of neighbor kids. My friend Marcia brought lemonade and cookies for volunteers. I had to buy a second washer and dryer just for towels. One of the most surprising changes came from my own family. My dad, who'd always been skeptical of my animal habit, started showing up on Saturdays with lumber and tools. "Thought you could use a better fence," he said one morning. "These little ones are clever." Together, we built new gates, repaired the shed, and even constructed a shaded run in the back for dogs in recovery. My dad didn't say much, but he always brought treats in his shirt pocket and slipped them to Bucket like a secret. "He's a good dog," he said once, scratching behind Bucket's ears. "I was wrong about this stuff. I see it now." That meant more than I let on. Then came the news I hadn't expected. My boss Jonathan called. "You're doing something incredible, Morgan. It's all over the local papers. I think it's time we promoted you to community outreach specialist. You'll still do showings, but we want you to lead a program that ties real estate with rescue partnerships. You in?" I laughed, stunned. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. We've had 3 clients in the last month mention your rescue when deciding to move here. You're not just selling houses, you're building community. I accepted. The new role meant more flexibility, better pay, and a reason to talk about rescue work even during house tours. I partnered with a builder who donated a corner of each new development for small off-leash dog parks. Clients with pets started asking for my listings specifically. One afternoon, I was showing a house to a young couple. Their toddler was cranky, arms flailing, tears rolling down his face. Then Bucket padded over, sat beside the boy, and gently placed a paw on his knee. The boy stopped crying and giggled. "I think he approves," I said. They bought the house. On a warm Sunday evening, after another successful adoption day, I sat on the back porch with a lemonade in hand. Bucket lay on my left, Ella on my right, and Violet snoozed near the steps while her pups tumbled in the grass. I heard laughter from the front, volunteers saying goodbye, kids begging to come back next weekend. The sun dipped low behind the trees. My body ached from the day's work, but in that slow, satisfying way. I let my head fall back against the chair, and for a moment, I just breathed. Dogs barked in the distance, wind rustled the leaves, and I knew that I hadn't lost anything all those months ago. I'd only begun to find what I was meant for, and there was so much more ahead. When I walked into the feed store that Wednesday afternoon, I had no idea I'd be leaving with another dog, or rather, he'd be following me out. I was just there for grain-free kibble and disinfectant spray. The cashier, a lanky teenager named Jesse, waved as I passed the stacked bags of mulch and fertilizer. "Hey, Morgan," he said. "We got a new visitor out back. Might be your kind of thing." I raised an eyebrow. "Another stray?" He shrugged. "Big guy, maybe shepherd or husky mix. Been here since this morning. We tried calling animal control, but they're backed up. He won't let anyone touch him. Just sits by the dumpsters." I followed Jesse to the loading dock. The air was thick with the smell of feed and old hay. Behind the building, near the trash bins, sat a massive black and white dog. His fur was thick but matted. Ears alert, tail stiff as a board. He stared straight ahead like he didn't trust himself to blink. I crouched low, careful not to startle him. "Hey there, buddy. What's your story?" No response, just a twitch of the ears. I tossed a few treats from my pocket. He didn't move, but he didn't growl either. "Jesse, I'm going to need a slip lead and one of those big crates you keep in storage." It took 20 minutes of slow movements, quiet talking, and some leftover chicken from my lunch to convince him to inch forward. Eventually, hunger won. He took the chicken from my hand, then sat beside me like he wasn't sure what came next. "You're okay now," I whispered. "Let's go home." Back at the house, I set up the crate in the mudroom and left the door open. He walked in on his own, turned in a tight circle, and collapsed with a grunt. I didn't name him right away. He felt like a mystery I hadn't solved yet. The vet visit the next day revealed no microchip, a sprained paw, and early signs of heartworm. The team cleaned him up, trimmed his claws, and prescribed treatment. When they asked for a name for the file, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. Moose. It fit. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with a quiet strength. Introducing Moose to the others required caution. Bucket was, as usual, gentle and calm. Ella stayed close, but didn't press. Violet, being more timid, watched from a distance. Moose didn't seek affection. He barely moved for the first 2 days. But on the third night, while I sat reading on the floor nearby, he let out a deep sigh and rested his massive head on my lap. I didn't move for 20 minutes, afraid to break the spell. That was the beginning of something different. Moose was unlike any dog I'd ever taken in. He didn't play. He didn't bark. But he watched everything. He seemed to learn by observation. Where the water bowls were, when meals were served, what the front door meant. After a week, he started following me from room to room, always keeping a few feet of space. A quiet shadow. Then came the mailman incident. One morning, as I signed for a package on the porch, the postman leaned over to pet Ella. Moose burst through the screen door with a growl that stopped both of us cold. He didn't bite. Didn't even snap. But he positioned himself between me and the mailman, low and stiff, eyes locked. I apologized profusely. The postman, bless him, just chuckled. Guess he thinks you're his job now. That night, Moose curled beside my bed for the first time. Around that time, I started a blog. A few friends had encouraged it, saying I should share some of the stories from the patch. So I wrote about Franklin, about Violet and her puppies, and about Bucket, how he changed everything. The post about Moose went viral. I didn't mean for it to. I wrote it during a thunderstorm, laptop propped on a pillow while Moose rested by the fireplace. I titled it, "The Dog Who Forgot How to Ask for Help." I wrote about finding him by the dumpsters, his silent patience, the way he protected without permission. People shared it like wildfire. Comments poured in. Donations followed. Suddenly, the patch had an influx of support I wasn't prepared for. Volunteers, supplies, new crates, leashes, toys, even a portable grooming tub. Then came the interview requests. I declined most of them. I didn't want fame. But I did accept a segment with a local station, mainly because they promised to highlight the need for foster homes. They sent a kind woman named Andrea to film. She spent a full afternoon with us, following me through feeding routines, walks, crate cleaning, and the chaotic joy of puppy playtime. "He's really something," Andrea said, crouching beside Moose. "Yeah," I said, rubbing his side. "He doesn't wag his tail often, but when he does, it's like the world gets warmer." The segment aired the following week. I didn't watch it live, but my phone exploded with messages that night. Friends, neighbors, even people I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. Then came the letter. It was handwritten, tucked inside a yellow envelope that arrived a few days later. No return address, just a first name at the bottom. "Morgan, I watched your interview. I think the dog you call Moose might be the one I lost 2 years ago. His name was Ringo. He disappeared during a cross-country move when someone left a gate open. We searched for months. I can't be sure. It's been so long. But his eyes look the same. If you're willing, I'd love to meet him. No pressure. I just want to know he's okay. Luke." My stomach turned. I read the letter 5 times. The handwriting was careful, like someone had tried too hard not to shake. I sat with it for a while. Then I took a deep breath and called the number scribbled at the bottom. Luke's voice cracked the moment I said Moose was safe. Would it be all right if I came by? Just to see? We arranged for the next afternoon. I spent that morning brushing Moose, trimming the fur around his eyes, trying not to feel possessive. I knew this was right. I knew Moose might have a past I didn't know about, but the thought of him leaving left a dull ache in my chest. When Luke arrived, I recognized him from the station's description. Late 30s, clean-cut, gentle face with deep-set eyes. He brought a picture with him. It was Moose, Ringo, smiling beside a younger man and a black lab. The moment Luke stepped onto the porch, Moose stood up. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just walked forward, sniffed the man's hand, and leaned his massive head against his chest. Luke dropped to his knees, tears sliding down his face. "It's you. It's really you." I stepped back, giving them space. They stayed like that for several minutes. Later, we sat on the porch. Moose lay between us, eyes half closed, tail twitching now and then. "I never thought I'd see him again," Luke said. "He was my brother's dog first. When my brother passed, I took him in. He went missing during the move. It crushed me." "He's done a lot of healing here," I said, "but I think he remembers." Luke nodded, staring at Moose. "He's different now, quieter, but it's him." We talked for over an hour, about dogs, loss, life. When he stood to leave, Luke hesitated. "Would you be okay with me visiting? Not to take him, just to see him sometimes." I smiled. "I think that would be good for both of you." Moose didn't follow Luke to the car. He stayed beside me, head resting against my leg. That night he curled up on the rug like always. I sat beside him, stroking the back of his neck. "You're home now," I whispered, "but you're allowed to remember." Moose didn't respond, but for the first time since I found him, he sighed in his sleep. And I took that as an answer. The patch kept growing. More dogs came, more stories were shared. Some happy, some hard. But every single one mattered. Because they weren't just rescue dogs. They were pieces of something whole we were all building, together. The call came at 3:12 in the morning. I was deep in sleep, Bucket curled behind my knees and Ella softly snoring against the door. The ringtone startled me awake, and for a second I thought it was an alarm. Then I saw the name. Marissa. My heart thumped. Rescue folks only call that late when something's wrong. "Hello?" Her voice was hoarse, and I could hear wind in the background. "Sorry, Morgan. I wouldn't call unless it was serious. There's a seizure at the Bakersfield Mill property. A big hoarding case. Sheriff called us in. We're pulling over 50 dogs. It's chaos." I sat upright, swinging my legs over the bed. "What do you need?" "Space, transport, anything. We've got sick pups, seniors, and some pregnant ones. Can you take any tonight?" I was already grabbing my hoodie. "Give me 30 minutes. I'll meet you there." The drive was quiet, the kind of eerie calm that only happens before sunrise. Fog hung low over the 2-lane road, and the radio played soft country ballads that didn't match my pulse. My SUV was packed with crates, towels, extra water, and first aid kits. I'd done emergency runs before, but never one this big. When I arrived at the property, flashing lights lit up the crumbling remains of the old lumber mill. Vans lined the perimeter. I could see shapes moving, volunteers, animal control, and huddled dogs everywhere. Marissa waved me down with a flashlight. Her hair was pinned back, face streaked with grime. "Bless you," she breathed. "Come this way. We've got some moms and litters that need calm space." She led me to a tarp-covered area, where 5 small crates sat in a row. Inside each, a trembling dog curled around newborns, or tiny, squirming pups. My heart broke open. "Take what you can," she said. "Even just one helps." I took 3. Back at the patch, I moved like muscle memory. Crates unloaded, space heaters positioned, food and water filled. Bucket hovered nearby, curious but calm. Ella stayed back, sensing the tension. The 3 dogs, whom I quickly named Sugar, Birch, and Mama Joe, were in rough shape. Sugar's eyes were crusted shut. Birch was skin and bones. Mama Joe bled slightly with every step she took, and her puppies squealed in hunger. I stayed up until noon cleaning, feeding, tending. Carol came by with medication and gauze. She didn't ask questions, just started working. "We'll get them through this," she said, stroking Sugar's head. News of the seizure spread fast. The local paper ran a piece about the mill case, and the patch's name got mentioned as a safe haven. Donations tripled overnight. I used the funds to bring in a part-time vet tech, a college student named Bryce, who had a way with skittish dogs, and an endless supply of calming energy. I used to be scared of dogs, he admitted during his first shift. Now I can't imagine life without them. We became a strange little team. Me, Bryce, Carol, and the core pack. Bucket, Ella, Violet, Moose, and now our new arrivals. Every day started before the sun and ended long after the stars came out. Then, on a drizzly Saturday morning, a woman in a pea coat knocked on the gate. She looked out of place. Clean, crisp, with perfectly styled gray hair and a clutch purse instead of anything practical. I met her halfway down the path. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," she said, offering a tight smile. "My name is Marion Blake. I'm with the Carter Foundation. We fund animal welfare projects across the country." I blinked. "Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting a—" "I'm not here to scare you," she added, softer now. "I saw the news article. My daughter sent it to me. She said you reminded her of our family's first foster dog." We ended up sitting in the backyard, steam rising from our coffee mugs, dogs weaving in and out of our feet. "This place," Marion said, glancing around, "has heart. I've been to 50 shelters, rescue farms, clinics, but this one, it's different." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "It's messy and loud and kind of thrown together." "Exactly," she said, smiling. "Real." Marion offered a micro-grant that day, enough to build a second structure for recovery space and isolation. I said yes before she finished her sentence. Construction started 2 weeks later. Volunteers from all over the county showed up. Some brought hammers, others brought lunch. A few just brought stories. One older man, whose name I never caught, helped carry beams while telling me about his German Shepherd from 20 years ago. "Lost him in a flood," he said. "Didn't talk about it much. Didn't think I needed to. But standing here, with all this, feels like I'm remembering the best parts of him again." The recovery wing opened in April. We named it the Daisy Room, after Violet's smallest pup, who passed quietly one morning in her sleep. A loss that shook me more than I expected. But the Daisy Room became a place of second chances. We took in 3 blind puppies from a backyard breeder. A senior pug with no teeth, a shepherd with seizures. Every single one found a foster or adopter. Meanwhile, Moose surprised us all. He started sleeping with his chin on Ella's back. He let Sugar's pups crawl over him like a jungle gym. He even started wagging when Bryce arrived. Then, one afternoon, as I was cleaning out crates, I turned and saw him standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. She wore overalls and hiking boots, hair pulled back in a messy braid. "Hi," she said, giving Moose a treat. "This guy showed up at my Jeep like he knew me. You must be Morgan." I blinked. "I am? And you are?" "Harper. I just moved to town. Got a flyer about your adoption day. Decided to check things out. Didn't expect to make a friend." We talked for an hour. About dogs, rescue, life. She'd worked at a sanctuary in Arizona and was hoping to get involved locally. Moose didn't leave her side. That night, I found myself smiling at the memory of their meeting. I hadn't thought about anyone new in a long time, not since Ethan. But this felt different, not pressure, just a flicker of possibility. Over the next few weeks, Harper became a regular. She helped clean, walk dogs, even taught a few obedience tricks. The dogs adored her. So did the volunteers. And I found myself listening more when she spoke, laughing more when she was around. Still, I kept things simple, focused. The patch needed me, and that was enough. But one evening, after a long day of medical intakes and stormy weather, Harper brought over a peach pie. "Thought you could use something sweet," she said. We sat on the porch, dogs scattered at our feet, rain tapping gently on the roof. "You know," she said, slicing the pie, "I've been to a lot of places, but none felt like this." "Like what?" She looked out at the yard. "Like coming home." I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight. I looked down at Bucket, then at Moose, whose tail tapped lightly against the wood. And for a second, I let myself imagine. Not a future built out of plans and timelines, but one built out of quiet evenings, shared work, and muddy paw prints. It wasn't the life I'd pictured. It was better. Still, there was work to do. Always more dogs to help. Always another call coming in just before dinner. And I wouldn't have it any other way. The heat wave rolled in like an unwelcome guest. By late May, the temperatures soared past 90 every afternoon, and even the early mornings felt like walking through soup. The dogs sprawled out in front of fans and under shade tarps, tongues lolling, paws twitching from the effort of staying cool. I kept water bowls full, laid down wet towels, and rotated frozen treats every few hours. It was during one of those scorching mornings that Bryce came jogging across the yard, waving a clipboard. "Morgan, we've got a call from the county shelter. They're overcrowded again, and they've got one case they're flagging." I wiped sweat from my forehead with the corner of my shirt. "Flagging how?" Dog was tied behind a gas station for days. He bit a man who tried to drag him away by the collar. Now they've marked him as aggressive. Did the man have a leash? Bryce shook his head. "Nope, just tried to yank him up." I took the clipboard and scanned the notes. Male pit mix, estimated 4 years old, scars along muzzle and ribs, inconsistent behavior. I exhaled slowly. "Tell them I'll take him." The shelter drop-off happened later that afternoon. I cleared a space in the Daisy room and waited by the intake area. The van backed in, its brakes hissing like a tired sigh. 2 officers got out, followed by a third who opened the rear hatch. The dog inside wore a muzzle and sat in a plastic crate. Even from 10 feet away, I could see the tension in his shoulders. "He's yours now," the officer said flatly. I nodded and signed the intake forms. "What's his name?" I asked. One officer shrugged. "No tag. We just called him Red." Red didn't move when I opened the crate door. He stared through the slits in the muzzle, unblinking. I crouched low and spoke softly. "You're safe now. Let's take this slow." It took 20 minutes and a lot of patience, but he eventually stepped out. He didn't growl, didn't lunge, just stayed pressed low to the ground. Every muscle taut. I kept him separate for the first few days. He barely ate. Flinched at sudden sounds. Never wagged. But he also never snapped. He simply existed like he was waiting to be hurt again. Bucket was the first to bridge the gap. One morning, I found him lying just outside Red's pen, front paws stretched forward, eyes half-lidded like he was napping. Red stood inside the pen, ears back, watching. After 10 minutes, he inched closer to the bars. Then he lay down, mirroring Bucket. It became a daily thing. I started feeding them side by side, first with the fence between, then slowly allowing supervised time together. Red followed Bucket's lead, always one cautious step behind. It was like watching someone learn how to live again by copying kindness. After 2 weeks, Red wagged his tail. Just once, after I brought him chicken broth in his bowl. I nearly cried. The day he let me remove his muzzle, I sat on the floor of the pen with my palms open. He approached slowly, ducked his head, and let me slip the straps free. Then he backed up and lay down without a sound. That night I called Carol. "I think we've got a long-term resident on our hands," I said. "Good," she replied. "Sounds like you're exactly what he needed." Harper started coming by more regularly around then, not just for pie deliveries and short visits, but for full days. She helped manage medical logs, trained the puppies, and even fixed the faulty latch on the side gate. "Told you my sanctuary experience would come in handy," she said with a grin. Moose had adopted her fully. He followed her like a second shadow, even choosing her side of the porch swing over mine some evenings. I pretended to be offended. Secretly, I loved it. One weekend, we hosted a community fair, a patch picnic, as Bryce called it. We set up adoption booths, ran agility demos with the dogs, and filled coolers with lemonade and watermelon slices. Kids ran barefoot across the grass. Seniors sat beneath umbrellas sharing old dog stories. Volunteers handed out information packets and homemade dog treats. Red stayed in the shaded recovery area, but he watched it all. When a toddler toddled too close to his pen, Red didn't bark. He simply sat and observed. I watched that moment carefully. When the child's mother came to scoop him up, Red turned and walked to the back of the pen. A quiet retreat. Not fear, just space. That alone was progress. In the following weeks, I noticed something shifting. Not just in the dogs, but in myself. I'd built the patch to be a place of healing, a haven for others. But somewhere along the line, it had become my own sanctuary too. A place where I didn't need to justify my choices. A place where I didn't have to constantly explain why I prioritized animals over parties, peace over pressure, quiet mornings over perfect plans. Harper saw it too. "You've made something rare here," she said one evening, watching Red lie beside Bucket in the sun. "It's not just a rescue. It's a kind of truth." That word stayed with me. Truth. I started journaling again. Not for the blog, not for an audience, just me. Late at night, after the dogs were fed and the porch was swept, I'd curl up with a pen and write. About Red's first tail wag, about Violet's growing confidence, about how Moose nudged his toy toward Ella, even though she never played. And about Harper. How her laughter made the bad days shorter. How her presence never crowded, only added. I didn't know where that would lead, but I knew I liked where it was. Then came the fire. It was lightning. Dry season. One strike to an old oak tree 3 miles from the patch. By the time smoke reached the horizon, we had 20 minutes to prepare. I had a plan, always did. Emergency crates, transport routes, vet contacts on standby. Bryce called volunteers. Carol packed meds. Harper loaded food bins and water. The smoke thickened fast. I could hear sirens in the distance, feel heat in the wind. But we moved like clockwork. Dogs were loaded. Crates secured. We split into 3 cars. I took Bucket, Red, and Mama Joe. Bryce drove the van with the puppies. Harper took Moose and Ella. We drove to a nearby equine center that opened its gates for emergency sheltering. Dozens of animals already filled the barns: goats, horses, cats in carriers. We stayed there for 2 nights. The fire was contained before reaching our property. Only the back edge of the fence line was scorched. No structures lost. No dogs hurt. Still, Those 2 nights reminded me how fragile everything was, how quickly the sanctuary we'd built could vanish. On the morning we returned, I walked through each room. The daisy room, still filled with lavender-scented towels. The yard, brown in patches but intact. The porch swing, the scattered toys. Everything smelled like smoke. But it was still home. Red padded up beside me and leaned his weight against my hip. I scratched behind his ears. We're still standing. That afternoon, I wrote a blog post titled The Fire Line. I talked about how close we'd come to losing it all, how resilience isn't about being untouched, but about staying when the smoke clears. The response was overwhelming. One comment stood out. I lost my house last year, didn't know how to start over. Your post made me want to try again. There it was again. Truth. We weren't just rescuing dogs, we were giving people reasons to believe in healing, and every day we chose to keep going. Together. It was the middle of June when the invitation arrived, printed on thick ivory cardstock and delivered in a gold-trimmed envelope. It looked completely out of place among the usual stack of rescue supply invoices and vet bills, and I almost tossed it, thinking it was a wedding invite from someone I didn't know. But then I read the heading, Midwest Animal Rescue Honors Banquet. Underneath, in elegant script, honoring Morgan Pierce, founder of The Patch, for outstanding community service in canine welfare. I stared at it for a full minute before I sat down. I didn't recognize the name of the person who nominated me, but later found out it was Marion Blake, the donor from the Carter Foundation. The event was being held 3 hours north in Lakeview, at a resort hotel. Semi-formal attire, dinner, speeches, awards. I wasn't sure how I felt about it. That night, I asked Harper about it as we walked the perimeter fence, checking latches and letting the dogs stretch before dusk. You should go, she said. Let people celebrate you for once. I don't like attention. I know. That's why it means more, because you never asked for it. I sighed. It just feels strange. Everything we do here, it's a group effort. It's not just me. Harper smiled, crouching to scratch Violet behind the ears. Exactly. But you're the one who built the fire. We just showed up to help you keep it going. The next morning, I let Carol and Bryce know. They insisted on covering everything while I was gone, and even arranged for 2 more volunteers to stay over the weekend. Don't worry, Bryce said. Nothing's going to fall apart. Go get your fancy plaque. Harper offered to come with me, and I didn't hesitate to say yes. We left Bucket, Ella, and the rest of the core group with the others. I hated being away from them, even for a night, but I knew they were in good hands. The drive to Lakeview was quiet and green, the road winding through forests and farmland. Harper played folk music low on the radio, and we passed the time with stories about our old jobs, our first pets, the worst coffee we'd ever tasted. The hotel was something else, glass-fronted, modern, with a lobby that smelled like eucalyptus and polished wood. Our room had a view of the lake, the water reflecting streaks of early evening sunlight. I laid out the one nice dress I owned, navy blue, simple, with a cinched waist. Harper wore a soft gray shirt, tucked into the black pants, her hair down for the first time in months. We laughed when we realized we'd accidentally matched. At the banquet, I found myself at a table with rescue workers from all over the Midwest. Some ran shelters out of warehouses. Others ran rural sanctuaries with goats and pigs alongside the dogs. Everyone had scars, some visible, some not. We shared them like stories around a campfire. When my name was called, my stomach tightened. I walked up to the podium, the applause feeling too loud, too sharp. I accepted the plaque with a nod, then cleared my throat to speak. "I didn't plan to run a rescue," I said. "I just found a dog by the road and couldn't leave him there. His name was Bucket. He's the reason I'm here." I told them about that night, about how he changed me, about how each dog who followed opened a part of me I didn't know I'd closed, about how healing isn't just something we give the animals, it's something they give us right back. When I finished, there was silence for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Others followed. I stepped down, face burning but heart steady. Harper found me outside afterward, standing by the lake, the plaque in my hand. "You didn't tell me you were going to make everyone cry," she teased. "I didn't mean to. It just sort of came out." She stepped closer. "I'm glad it did. You were honest. That's why it mattered." We stood in silence for a while, listening to frogs call across the water. Then she nudged my shoulder. "So, how about we build a second dog run this summer? We've got enough land." I grinned, already drawing up plans in my head. When we returned the next morning, the dogs greeted us like we'd been gone a year. Bucket pushed his nose into my hip so hard I nearly dropped my bag. Moose howled for the first time I'd ever heard. Red ran to the fence and actually jumped up with his front paws against the gate. All right, I laughed. "We're back. We missed you too." That afternoon, I sat down to sort through the next round of foster applications. One stood out, a woman named Lillian, recently retired, looking to adopt an older dog who didn't need too much activity. She mentioned losing her husband the year before and wanting a quiet companion. I thought of Sugar. She'd been with us for nearly 6 months. Her eyes were clear now, her coat thick again, but she remained gentle and still, often sitting by the window for hours. I'd been waiting for the right match. I called Lillian. 2 days later, she came by with a knit scarf around her neck and a smile that looked both hopeful and hesitant. Sugar walked to her like they'd met before. Lillian knelt, cradled Sugar's face, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she looked at me, tears in her eyes. "I think we understand each other." Sugar left that afternoon, curled on a blanket in the back seat of Lillian's car. I stood by the gate as they drove off, heart a little tender, but proud. The days blurred together again. More intakes, more vet visits, more crate scrubbings and kibble runs. We built the second run Harper mentioned, roped in a retired carpenter named Glenn, who brought his own tools and refused payment beyond coffee and banana bread. Bryce started leading school field trips, teaching kids about rescue work and kindness. Carol trained 2 new volunteers in wound care and medication. The patch became not just a rescue, but a hub, a place where people found meaning, direction, and second chances right alongside the dogs. We hosted a foster appreciation picnic that summer. I grilled hot dogs while Harper organized a doggy obstacle course, and Red surprised us all by weaving through it like a pro. Everyone clapped. He barked once, his first bark. I looked around and saw what we'd built. A place of welcome. A place of love. A place where dogs who'd been forgotten were remembered every single day. And somehow, that memory always started with a quiet moment on the side of a road. A moment that never stopped changing everything. But the work wasn't finished. It never would be. And we were ready for whatever came next. The first frost came earlier than usual. By mid-October, the mornings were crisp and silver with thin ice across the porch railings. The dogs started sleeping closer together, curling like commas in the warmest corners of the house. Even Red, who had once claimed the back hall as his private refuge, began sharing a blanket with Ella and Moose in front of the heater. We were deep into prep for winter, reinforcing the kennels, sealing gaps in the daisy room, stacking straw bales along the outside walls to insulate against wind. Bryce and I made supply runs almost daily, returning with bags of kibble, heating pads, vet meds, and donated coats for the dogs who didn't have the thick fur to handle the coming cold. One evening, just as I'd finished covering the garden beds with burlap, Carol arrived unannounced, her little hatchback packed with boxes. "New donation haul," she called out as she stepped from the car. "Also, you're going to want to see this." She opened the rear door and lifted out a tiny creature wrapped in a towel. I thought it was a kitten at first. Then I saw the ears and the thin, shaking legs. "Foxhound mix," she explained, placing the bundle gently into my arms. "Found on the edge of a cornfield, dumped with 4 others. 2 didn't make it. One's with a vet in Ridgeland. This one, I didn't want to leave her alone." The pup was a wisp, barely breathing, ribs like fence wire. Her eyes were half closed, and her tail gave the smallest flick when I tucked her closer. "We'll take care of her," I said. We named her Wren. Wren became the heartbeat of the week. Everything moved around her schedule. Feedings every 2 hours, warm compresses, constant monitoring. I slept on a cot beside her crate, waking at the slightest sound. Bucket checked on her every morning, sniffing gently before laying beside her pen. Red paced nearby, watching like a soldier on duty. Ella guarded the entry to the room, as if to say, "No one comes in unless they're here to help." Wren's fight was slow. She had a seizure on day 3, stopped breathing on day 6. Bryce revived her with soft chest compressions, while I sat on the floor with my eyes closed, praying to nothing in particular. On day 8, she licked my hand. That night, I cried into my sweatshirt, not out of sadness, but out of pure, exhausted hope. Wren wasn't the only challenge. As the holidays neared, adoptions slowed, but intakes climbed. Cold nights brought scared dogs out of hiding, strays seeking warmth, dumped pets abandoned by owners unwilling to face another winter. Some came to us half-starved, others too feral to touch for days. One in particular stood out. She arrived in a crate dropped off anonymously at the gate. No note, no microchip, just a yellow collar and a thin scar across her front leg. She didn't bark or growl. She stared, unmoving, unflinching. We called her Juno. Juno didn't react to other dogs, didn't eat for 2 days, refused all treats, even chicken. But she didn't lash out, just watched with cold, distant eyes. I spent hours sitting near her crate, reading out loud, letting her hear my voice. Slowly, she began to shift. Her ears twitched when Harper spoke. She sniffed Bucket through the bars one morning and didn't recoil. She finally accepted a bite of boiled egg from my hand on day 5. By Thanksgiving, Juno followed me into the yard on her own. That same week, Harper and I hosted a Thanks for Giving event. We invited former adopters and fosters to return for an afternoon of cider, cookies, and dog play in the big fenced field. We had name tags for the humans and color-coded bandanas for the dogs. Green for adopted here, orange for current fosters, blue for alumni of the patch's earliest days. Seeing them all there was surreal. Franklin, the old beagle from our first official intake, waddled up in a red sweater. Daisy's littermates, Fern and Clover chased tennis balls in the grass. Moose walked the perimeter like he was in charge of security, and Bucket held court in the shade under the oak tree, a circle of kids around him. Wren came too, now stronger, a little rounder, still a bit wobbly but determined. She wore a tiny yellow puffer vest and fell asleep on my lap halfway through the event. "This is a family," Harper whispered later that night as we cleaned up. "That's what you've made." I wanted to tell her it wasn't just me, that none of it could have happened without her, or Bryce, or Carol, or the volunteers who kept showing up with dog beds and elbow grease. But instead, I just nodded. "Feels like one," I said. The first snow came a week later. It was soft, silent, and magical. The dogs ran through it like toddlers, pouncing, rolling, eating it in confused delight. Even Juno pranced through the drifts with something close to joy. Harper caught it on video, and we posted it with the caption, "From forgotten to free." It was shared over 10,000 times in 2 days. Then came the call from an organization in Ohio. They had 20 dogs in a shelter scheduled for closure due to funding cuts. Could we take 3? Maybe 5? We didn't hesitate. We took 7. That weekend, the house and yard reached maximum chaos. We had dogs in every room, extra crates in the hallway, 3 volunteers staying overnight, and endless feeding and walking rotations. But it worked. Somehow, it always worked. I stood in the kitchen one night, heating up soup for the team, when Bryce walked in, looking bleary but content. "You know," he said, leaning against the counter, "when I first started here, I just needed internship hours. Thought I'd be cleaning cages and refilling water bowls." "You've definitely done both." He laughed. "Yeah, but it's more than that now. This place changes you. I didn't know I could care this much." I looked out the window at the yard, where Harper was tossing a ball for Wren and Red. Ella and Moose watched from the porch, side by side. "Same," I said softly. "Every single day." We got through December on little sleep and a lot of shared meals. Donations kept us afloat. One man sent a check with a note that read, "I lost my wife this year. Your videos are the only thing that kept me smiling. Thank you." I pinned that one on the fridge. On Christmas morning, we gave every dog a stocking filled with toys and treats. Carol dressed up as Mrs. Claus. Bryce wore reindeer antlers. Harper baked dog-safe cookies shaped like bones. We took a group photo on the porch. The dogs wouldn't sit still. The humans looked tired and joyful. There was fur on every sweater, and snow in every boot. And it was perfect. That night, as the fire crackled and the dogs snored in piles around the living room, I sat on the floor with Bucket's head in my lap. I didn't think about what we still needed to do. I didn't worry about the next intake, or the bills, or the inevitable heartbreak that came with rescue. I just breathed in the moment. Because for the first time in a long time, I realized something. We weren't just saving dogs anymore. We were saving each other. New Year's morning at the patch didn't begin with fireworks or resolutions. It started the way most days did. Dogs stretching, tails thumping, bowls clattering. But something about the stillness outside made it feel different. The snow from last week had mostly melted, leaving behind frost-kissed mud and a clear blue sky. I stepped outside with Bucket and Ella while the coffee brewed, boots crunching across the yard. Bucket paused at the gate, sniffed the air, then gave a low, contented huff. Behind us, Red nudged open the door with his nose and trotted out proudly, a stuffed toy hanging from his mouth like a trophy. Inside, Harper was already up, her hair still messy from sleep, sleeves rolled up as she cracked eggs into a mixing bowl. Moose watched her from the kitchen doorway, eyes bright, tail sweeping the floor. "Thought I'd make breakfast," she said. "For everyone, humans and otherwise." I smiled, pouring a second cup of coffee. You read my mind. Bryce arrived an hour later, still buttoning his coat. "Morning. Sorry I'm late. My aunt insisted I eat with them, but I told her the real party was here." He held up a bag of pastries and a new frisbee. The morning passed in easy silence and laughter. Dogs raced through the yard. Carol stopped by with a basket of blankets. We played fetch until our fingers went numb, and then gathered around the space heaters with hot drinks and second helpings of pancakes. In the early afternoon, I stepped into the Daisy room to check on Wren. She'd gained weight over the last few weeks, her coat filling in soft and golden. She didn't need the crate anymore. She'd graduated to a soft bed near the window where the sunlight streamed in. She lifted her head when I walked in, tail wagging. I sat beside her and scratched under her chin. "You're a miracle," I whispered. She stretched, then rested her paw on my knee. Later that week, a family visited looking to adopt. The father had been a medic in the Army. The mother taught 3rd grade. Their son, Sam, was 6 and walked with a leg brace. Wren took to him immediately. She walked beside him at his pace, gentle and steady. When Sam tripped over a rug and began to cry, Wren licked his face and sat beside him, unmoving until he calmed down. They adopted her on the spot. As I watched them drive off, Wren peeking out the rear window, I felt a sting behind my eyes. Not sadness, just a full heart. "That's the good kind of goodbye," Harper said, slipping her arm around my back. More came after that. Juno was adopted by a widower who said Juno reminded him of his wife's old shepherd. Violet found a home with a woman who ran a flower farm. Even Red found his perfect match, an older man named Kenny, a retired police officer who'd lost his canine partner the year before. The two of them bonded instantly. Red climbed into Kenny's truck like he'd always belonged there. I stood in the driveway, watching the taillights fade. Bucket came to stand beside me. "They're all finding their place," I murmured. "Just like you found yours." That spring, the patch received its official non-profit certification. Harper handled the paperwork. Bryce organized a celebration with balloons and a handmade banner. Local businesses offered donations and sponsored adoption fees. The newspaper ran a feature story with the headline, "One woman's roadside rescue turns into a community legacy." I didn't like the spotlight, but I understood the importance. People weren't just donating money, they were donating time, energy, belief. By summer, we expanded the Daisy room into a full recovery wing, added new fencing, installed better lighting in the play yard. Bryce recruited vet students for internships. Carol trained 2 new techs. Harper designed a line of patch merchandise, tote bags, hoodies, mugs. The profits helped cover food and medical bills. One night in July, as fireflies blinked in the fields and the porch creaked under our weight, Harper looked over at me. "You ever think about what's next?" I nodded. "All the time?" "Not for the rescue, for you." I thought for a moment, looked at the moonlight on the grass, listened to the rhythmic breathing of the dogs at our feet. "I think this is it." She turned toward me. "You sure?" "Yeah," I said. "For the first time in my life, I don't want to be anywhere else." Her hand brushed mine. We didn't need to say anything more. By the time autumn rolled in again, The patch had helped place nearly 100 dogs in homes. Some still sent photos. Some sent Christmas cards. Others just posted updates online with captions like, "The best decision we ever made." There were hard days, too. Dogs we couldn't save. Nights that ended in quiet tears. But the good outweighed it. Always was. The last dog of the season was a senior mutt named Gus. Gray muzzle, stiff hips, and a heart so big it filled every room. He stayed only a few weeks before a young couple adopted him. First-time dog owners. They cried when they left, clutching the blanket he came with. The house felt quiet after that. One evening, as I walked the yard alone, Bucket followed me to the back fence. He didn't move when I stopped, just stood there, watching the horizon with me. "We did good, didn't we?" I whispered. His tail wagged once. I knelt and hugged him, feeling the weight of everything. Loss, joy, healing, change, and love. Because that's what it had always been about. Not fixing what was broken, but making space for it. For second chances. For messy middles and peaceful ends. For family. I looked back at the house. The porch light glowed warmly. Laughter drifted through an open window. Inside, Moose was probably curled by the fire. Ella likely snoring on the couch. And Harper, waiting with a cup of tea and a smile. I stood, dusted off my knees, and opened the hat. Bucket followed me home. And just like that, another chapter began.